Mugendi Rita, we call it. And so he is more known as Mooks. We are very fortunate in our batch to have someone from outside the country. Mugendi hails from Kenya, to be part of, to be a peer student, which is it's a very amazing opportunity for all of us, because amongst us we had someone who not only brought a perspective outside the country, but also integrated so well and was actually a very interesting and also inspiring companion to have in terms of the kind of influence that he had in each one of us. I'm sure there are a lot of fans of MOOCs who have joined today who will vouch for what I'm saying. MOOCs actually as a very there are three things I found very interesting over the last few weeks that we have been exchanging with Mugendi on what he'll be talking today. There is one that I found very interesting about the way Mugendi has charted his career, is that he not only did his master's at IDC, he also went went to US and also did his other education in universities outside Kenya. But he actually anchored his entire career rooted to where he belonged, which is going back to his mother country. And he brought all of his education that he did outside to go and channelize into what he truly believed is to give back to his context. And that makes him very unique. And the other one is that he calls himself a transdisciplinary designer, where he looks at design not bucketed into one thing. He looks at its cross connections. He looks at how it impacts not only in terms of making of a product, making of a service. He's looking at the process. He's looking at the social context in which it happens. He has also expanded his goal to include sustainability. So if you see a very holistic outlook to design, and he has chosen a path of actually being an educator, where he can influence minds. The profile that I shared in the forum is probably not doing enough justice to the broad set of roles that he does. He's been in the part of several committees. He is a great influencer in a lot of policy making in the country. So, I mean, Mugendi, as we know, as a student to Mugendi who he is, I think there is a huge marked difference in terms of the stage in which he has grown. So, without taking too much of your time, just want to leave one thing before Mugendi starts. Is there is something that I want you all to really put your attention to, is the fact that he is bringing something very sensitive in terms of how a designer, as a very conscious designer, needs to look at a very broad outlook, bring a broad outlook to what they profess to do. And there's one that he really points out, and I want all of us to pay attention to, is about when you say user, you are actually talking about the user to whom we design, who is going to consume. Now he has got a very interesting thought that user needs to be those who are non-users also. In the sense, if I do for something for somebody, something for someone, there are so many others who are actually impacted by what I'm doing to someone. And that's what I heard come through very vigorously in his presentation. So I just want to let you know that there's some of the aspects that I'm sure he's going to cover at length, and I want to bring your attention to it. Without taking too much of your time, Mugendi, it's all yours.
Thanks, Ravi, and good to see you all. Had a couple of conversations reminiscing over old times. Because of my love for chicken, I almost got a new nickname, which was Mugendi, but that's good enough for me. And when I was particularly wise, I remember being called Mugendi, which I like very much. and I hope to remain wise even if I do still love chicken. The other thing which I'd like to share is just how formative the period of those 2 years at IDC have been to me as a designer, because of people like Uday Advankar and Kirti Trivedi, particularly what he took us through Indian thought and tradition. It actually caused me to rediscover Africa while I was in India. I know this might sound strange, but because of coming to appreciate the rich history of India, I started asking, so what does Africa have that I can actually celebrate as a designer? I remember one statement which I still use often, that Africa doesn't have a lot of money. So the next question is, then what does Africa have? And I think Ravi has alluded to why I've drawn myself moving away from the technical aspects of design and moving more towards the social, economic dimensions. And because Africa may not have a lot of money, but it has plenty of humanity. And that has been what has drawn me to working on the continent. So very quickly, with the assistance of Ravi clicking away, we'll start the presentation and then maybe have a quick discussion. So that's Africa for you, massive continent. Many people don't see it as big as it actually is, but there's a slide that will hopefully capture the true size of Africa. Then we are reminded that if the world was 100 people, we are then starting to look at some of the themes and sub-themes that connect us as humans. We start to see how language, no matter how much we speak, say, for example, English now, actually English is one of the lesser languages globally. There's far more people who speak Hindi or Chinese, for example, than would speak English. In fact, right now, I think about 6% of humanity speaks Spanish. So Spanish has supplanted English in that sense. Then there's health concerns, water concerns, education. I'm still very proud of Kerala for having a 99% literacy, which is a global, it's the highest globally. And some of us in Africa, at 40%, sometimes we are ashamed and we blush, even though you wouldn't notice because of my chocolate complexion. When our politicians brag about maybe hitting 45% literacy, when Kerala is not showing off yet, it's almost at 100%. So there's a lot of work to do. So moving on, we then see that the greatest disruption for humanity has reminded us that we are still one planet. I think there was a time the so-called developed countries, which I prefer to call the minority world, as opposed to the majority world, which India and Africa belong to, was hit as hard as so-called developing countries. And so in a sense, COVID was the great equalizer, and the disruptions from COVID have reminded us of our interconnectedness as humanity. Because suddenly it didn't matter if your next door neighbor country had high or low prevalence of COVID-19, you had to, ratchet up your own strategies. Unfortunately, we lost our daughter in October last year to this very pandemic. So it's very personal and very emotive as a subject, but it's real. And we're going to have to keep dealing with this as we go forward as a so-called new normal. So again, if we then move on and see that if you look at what the World Economic Forum has described as the top skills, you'll notice that from 2015 to the present, year to 2020 and now 2022, suddenly all the skills we used to think were design skills are coming to the fore. So critical thinking, empathy, and teamwork and social intelligence, which designers have in plenty, is now becoming what the rest of the world is being encouraged to inculcate both at the workplace and also in schools. Let's move on and see how that starts to reflect. The other thing which the design community has given the world is this thing called design thinking. Those of us who are students together remember, these were exactly the ways in which we went about our research projects. We had to engage with people, sometimes form focus groups, go into the library and do detailed research to establish a deeper understanding of what the challenge was. Now, the world has become much more complex since our heyday as students. And now we have so-called wicked problems, which have very loose definitions of what the problem is, and the solutions are even harder to come by. Secondly, and this was alluded to by Ravi, referring to me as what I call myself transdisciplinary, is we realize that designers alone do not have all the tools that we need. So, for example, the end user has embedded knowledge and tacit knowledge that we can tap into. And so when we start designing processes, now we start to co-opt them. And so we rarely talk about creation or design now. We talk about co-creation and co-design. So the idea of collaborative work, whether it's between designers and community members, or designers and psychologists and sociologists working together to develop solutions for communities, design thinking, which is a human-centered design approach, has become very, very popular. It helps that IDEO.org, which is one of the leading design consultancies in the world, has made it popular, and Stanford University through its D School, and then Potsdam also created a design thinking institute. And I was very fortunate in Cape Town, South Africa. We started the first design thinking school in Africa, and we'll be launching the building in October this year. So this is one of the things I'm very excited about. And moving forward. So those of you who remember me will recall that I was very fond of Proverbs, and Indians are rich in Proverbs. One of my favorite Indian proverbs is that women hold up half the sky, and I'm looking keenly to see if there's any representative of that gender. And the one that I want to speak to today is what I'm calling an African perspective. You'll notice that Africa is spelled with a K. That's very deliberate. This is a post-colonial decolonizing stance that we've taken in Africa, where all the languages on the continent, and I'm speaking of over 2,200 languages, all the way from Cape Town to Egypt and Morocco and Nigeria and Senegal on the other side, even East Africa and Kenya. We all, without exception, spell Africa with a K. So we've taken this as a kind of an epistemological stance to claim back our own identity and co-create a narrative of the Africa that we want to see. And we counter that or contrast it with Africa with a C, which is how the rest of the world sees Africa. And I believe in India, you would actually spell Africa with a K, if I'm not wrong, in most of your languages as well. So this Nigerian proverb, that until lions have their own historians, tales of the hunt will always glorify the hunter. Those of you that know how the colonial powers played and scrambled for the rest of the world and divided it like spoils, will realize that the colonial voice was very different from the voices of the natives who were colonized in that sense. So here we're trying to say we want to give the African perspective with Africans co-creating their own narrative. So Mugendi here, who's quoting this Nigerian proverb, has stood, put himself up, maybe even in the line of fire, to be one of the lion's historians. And the image of the lion that follows hopefully will remind you of that. It's beautiful that India and Africa have some very interesting coincidences. India has a lion. Maybe the mane is not as majestic as the Kenyan or African one. But Indians also have an elephant, which is quite unique from the African elephant. And what I like about the Indian elephant is that it's a lot more intelligent and a lot more teachable. The African elephant is wild and rogue and usually does not deal very well with people. So this is a picture of the Great Migration between the two countries of Tanzania and Kenya. And the only person in that mix who does not obey those laws of migration during the dry and wet seasons is the fellow that comes in the next picture. If you watch that and with me. Has he come yet? I don't see any difference. Maybe you need to go one more. There he is. Yeah, the crocodile. There's a saying in Africa that if you want to cross the river in a crowd so that you don't get eaten by the crocodile. Hopefully here today, I'm in a nice friendly crowd and the crocodile out there will not eat us. So let's proceed to the next point, which is where the wisdom comes from. Now, that is Africa. That is the true size of Africa. Many of you will notice that India fits into East Africa comfortably, and I am in East Africa. In fact, I would be in India right now if India was part of Africa, because Kenya is right there on the eastern side of the continent. Now, you'll notice the whole of China, the whole of the US, the whole of Western Europe, the whole of Japan and the UK comfortably fit into this map of Africa. So Africa is massive. That's what I was wanting to emphasize in this particular slide. So when we meet friends and they say hi to my friend in Nigeria, please realize that that would be the equivalent of someone in Mumbai asking me to say hi to someone in Beijing. And it's a massive place. And I hope you guys are not some of those friends who will send me to greet people in Nigeria. Moving forward, Africa also is rich in culture. These two women are from the Ndebele community in South Africa. You can see from their attire that they're from the same community. But if you look carefully, you'll see the lady on the left has a much larger, array of the brass neck bracing, which kind of gives you an idea of her status. So there's this idea that we are one, yet within that unity, we allow ourselves to be expressive and we express our individuality. We talk about Ubuntu in that sense. I am because we are. And if you look at this lady from the next lady whose face juxtaposes upon the Ndebele woman, Ravi, that's your cue. Yes. Then you'll see that's from a lady from Myanmar. They're called the Paduang giraffe-necked women. So suddenly, even though I often speak about Africa, I discover there's a universal aspect of design that you can find across the world. And so I've found the understanding of Africa, therefore, is there's unique expressions that are truly African, but there's far more expressions that connect us with the rest of humanity that are truly universal. And this is one example. Let's proceed. These are women from Botswana weaving baskets using reed and cane. I remember from the northeastern part of India, there's a lot of, I think in the Assam area, there's a lot of reed and cane furniture. I think we learned that when we were doing materials and processes. And that is something that I still celebrate here. So if you move to the next picture, you'll see the meanings of those patterns which are traditionally known by those women from Botswana. You'll find some are the ones at the bottom right hand, the urine trail of the urine trail of the bull. You'll see the swallows and so on. So all these are inspired by what happens around their communities. So there's a deeper meaning, and this is what I'm hoping to communicate, that these communities have held these rich meanings over millennia, but the uninitiated eye may miss the beauty and the deeper meaning that is invested in these designs. So I've become a student of craft, learning from other communities, because like Botswana is in Southern Africa, and seeing how they interpret their own culture into their weaving and so on. Let's proceed. This is hair braiding from the women of the Congo. The Democratic Republic of Congo is the second largest country in Africa. Most of you may know it because you have smartphones and laptops. There's this material we call coltan, which comes from the Congo, and it's used for compacting electronics so that you can have smart devices that are far smaller than the equipment that was used in yesteryears. So if you look at some of that hairdo, you'll see it's very intricate. And there's a gentleman known as Ron Eglash who studied the fractal geometry and the mathematics of Africa. And the next image will show you how the computer-generated fractal geometry actually studied the hairstyles that the women come up with. And you can see that it's plotted on graph paper, and it's a wonderful, beautiful piece of work. And this is done by women who have very low educational levels, but they carry this rich knowledge, which was handed down by their mothers, grandmothers, and other women before them. So again, moving forward, we find that There's a lot of materials that are known. For example, there's this material called the bark cloth, which is stripping the bark of a tree, which is found in Eastern Africa. And you can wrap the leaves with banana leaves so that it can regenerate quickly. And it can be used many years of just peeling off this bark and making it into products. So if you look at the next slide, the products are earth colored because that's based on the color of the material. So as long as you don't mind those beautiful warm brown and tan colors, you can get beautiful bags and other products from this particular material known as bark cloth. So this was done by a friend of ours from Uganda. And so part of what I've been doing as a student of design in Africa is switching off my preconceived notions of what I think I know and trying to learn as much as I can about how our ancestors designed products of exquisite beauty and yet without damaging the environment as we know it. So the next slide also will kind of put that in context. It's one of my favorite slides. This is not how we travel in Africa. I know some of you may want to direct message me afterwards and say, is that you driving those 3 donkeys? No, that is not me. That's a disclaimer. But this is an image from Botswana showing a philosophy that I think is very rich. It's about hybridity, how we can use solutions that are intermediate in nature, not the extreme high tech, and yet not the low tech. And you see this vehicle, which you wouldn't find on any road. Its edition died many years ago, but the cabin is still valuable if you can change the engine for a couple of donkeys. So this is donkey power and not horsepower. And I think it makes a lot of sense from a kind of a hybrid solution perspective. So I've worked a lot in that space where we don't always look for the ideal solution, but we look for the practical solution, the sustainable solution. Now, these are examples we did with some of our students where we looked at food production from the African context. And on the left, there's a traditional, very low-fi, low-tech grinder on a stone. And on the right, you have a beautiful pin made of granite, which then you can roll and create that grain, and a bit of marble to make it more aesthetically pleasing. So we can refresh old technologies into new ones. I think the mortar and pestle, there are parts of India where I saw this. Again, is a very basic grain production or processing product, particularly for us for maize or corn. And on the right, you'll see a modern interpretation of the same by our students, trying to understand how that same product could actually become, Ravi, that was your cue, how that product could become an accessory even in a modern interior. So you can see that beauty has not been lost, yet the beauty of this product in a 20th and 21st century setting can still work. So moving forward, we see examples of furniture designed by modern African designers. So the 2 sets of products inspired by the headrest, which is something that is used traditionally by our elders. When they lie on the ground, they put their head on the ones on the right. That inspired those stools. You can see the 3 stools. And on the left, many of you will recognize the drums, which Africa is famous for. I remember Satish and I playing drums and creating music. I think Prasid was also part of that, and many others who I will not mention so that I don't run out of time. But those are inspired by African drums, African drum sets. And this gentleman is known as Peter Mabel from Botswana. Let's move to the next one, where a gentleman from Senegal known as Bibi Sek produces beautiful woven furniture using the talent of women from his community. Now, Bibi Sek is the one who designed the interior of the Renault Scenic, which was one of the iconic vehicles. And he decided to pay homage, to pay tribute to his own, upbringing and worked with these women to come up with these beautiful products that you can see there that are of incredible beauty. Moving forward. Then this young man in the middle is known as Laduma. He's from South Africa. He comes from a community which has those click sounds. You may have heard Miriam Makeba singing the click sounds. and he's from the Xhosa community. I just made the click for your benefit. And that particular community, when men come of age, they have to have new clothes, not like the emperor, but definitely new clothes as they enter into manhood. And he was inspired by the beadwork of his community and came up with those beautiful knitwear that now is showcased in London, New York, and Paris and other places of high fashion. So these are examples of how modern designers in Africa are rehashing and refreshing traditionally available sources of influence and inspiration and creating newness. This is a product that won the Red Dot Award. For those of you who know the Red Dot, which is awarded in Germany, it's what we call the Oscar of industrial design awards, because it's the highest awards in the world. And this is a product that was developed in Cape Town by my colleagues and I, where we developed a charging and battery storage system, which you can charge using any wheel of a bicycle. And then it can power, laptops and phones and so on. This won what is called the Best of the Best Awards, which is if it's the Oscars, again, it's a top award for that particular. So there's a shift also globally towards recognizing sustainability as a matter of concern. So it's a good example of a modern sustainable product, which is high tech, but at the same time speaks to the need for off-grid solutions, distributed renewable energy. Moving forward, this is a project that was done by one of our students in his 4th year of undergraduate studies. I believe Nuru in Hindi also means light. Is that correct? I'm waiting for feedback. Does Nuru mean light in Hindi?
No.
What is the word for light?
Prakash.
Oh, okay. That is far from where I was.
But there might be a point there, because I think Nuru is Noor.
Noor, yeah,
Urdu,
Noor
Yes.
in Urdu means
In
light.
Urdu, Noor is
So you're sort of
enlightened.
right, yes.
Satish, you've
No.
just redeemed my faith in myself. I was about to fade into the background until I recover. Yeah, thank you, because I was sure that I heard that there was a word that was related. So in Swahili, Nuru means light, and it must have come from the Urdu a variant of that word. But I'll remember that Prakash indeed is the more commonly used word for light. But in this case, Nuru sounds very nice, very romantic. But anyway, I digress. So someone came up with a product which was to replace the kerosene, little lamps with a wick, which are very low tech because of smoke inhalation and also fires that they start. And using LED lights, which are rechargeable. This was a prototype tested in Rwanda, which is in Central Africa. So this is the system. You kind of get a sense of how you can couple the lights into a modular system. You can hang them, you can, rotate them. And the business model came out of this process where you can, charge using a kind of a cycle thing that you can pedal. If you go to the next slide, you'll see examples of how you can use even seesaw. But the one on the top left hand and on the right side shows you how you can recharge the units. And you can recharge about 5 of those lamps by pedaling for half an hour. You charge them sufficiently to last actually a day. And there's a business model that has come out of that. If you have mains supplies, you can plug it in or use solar panels and so on. So this is a project that has turned into an NGO. And I believe that NGO now is in Bangladesh and in India as well. And it actually started with this this entrepreneur who was based in the US, who approached one of our students as a live project to help come up with the system. We also developed a vehicle for a lady who was born without hands, a lady called Nikki Abdinor. It was the first drive-by-wire system we came up with. So you can plug it into any vehicle. So the gentleman in the foreground is one of our master's students. who's now interviewing Nikki, who's sitting there and giving a bit of input as we were developing the prototype for this vehicle. This was when I was teaching in Cape Town until 2018, at the end of which I came back to Kenya. So we can proceed. This slide has been deliberately moved. Now, this is a slide of the Nuru NGO. So you can find the website and you can see some of the items I had described previously. We also developed Africa's first electric vehicle in Cape Town called the Joule. Joule is the unit of energy. The optimal Joule vehicle headed by a gentleman who was formerly a designer with Jaguar. This vehicle, we developed 5 prototypes. They're still running even as I speak. And back in 2014, we actually showcased them. But unfortunately, we did not take them to production because the deal for production fell through. I believe making and selling cars is a very different business from developing prototypes. And we learned that the humbling way. This is another electric vehicle that was produced in Uganda. It's called the Kiera electric vehicle. Happily, this second electric vehicle in Africa is now in production under the patronage of the president of that country. And on the top left-hand corner, you'll see the Kiera bus. And these are electric buses that are actually being used in Kampala in Uganda at present. So these are live projects which, as we speak. There's a gentleman called Moses from Kenya who produced the first African passenger drone. This was his prototype when he tested it. As you can see, it hadn't reached the point of being safe enough not to wear a helmet. But now it's gone into the next stage where they're trying to see its feasibility for air taxis, which can be used here in Kenya. We have a serious traffic challenge, I believe, like many modern cities, particularly in the developing part of the world. We also have Africa's first drone port, that is in Kigali, Rwanda. You can see a drone in the foreground, and that drone delivers payloads of medicines and blood for transfusion to any part of Rwanda within 17 minutes, much more efficiently than any vehicle, ambulance, because the terrain is very hilly and the infrastructure is still very basic. So this was the first time. I think many of you have heard of Sir Norman Foster, the great architect who was involved in many projects, even in Dubai. He collaborated with local architects to come up with the drone port, which you see in the image there. Yes, so now I'm going to rattle through quickly. This might be of interest to everyone. There's 5 mega trends that are informing the things that we do at a global scale. Some of them we are doing at a much more localized scale, but they have global impact. We're going to rush through a couple of them. This is from PricewaterhouseCoopers, projecting on what the mega trends of the 2020s are, and we are right in that space right now. So the first of this is demographic shifts. Ravi, are you still there? Yeah, thank you very much. Please proceed. And this is what's happening with the aging populations. That slide you saw from a baby crawling to an elderly person. We know countries like Japan actually already have a very large section of their population that are considered elderly. In fact, even centenarians and octogenarians, the highest number as a percentage of any population is in Japan. And so there are unique services that people now are looking at. Remember, when you invest in children who are between the ages of 1 all the way up to about 19, you're investing in them because you expect them to give some kind of return in their lifetime. The minute you're dealing with the elderly, you're keeping them alive. So from an investment point of view, Africa and India in that essence is a very vibrant economy because we have a rich population of young people. We have very young populations, which means we can actually grow our economies much quicker when Other countries like France in Europe, and I've mentioned Japan and even China, when the population start aging, they start using up more of the social welfare grants, and they're not particularly giving back to society, but actually consuming the resources that they saved in their lifetime. I'm speaking with a lot of compassion because we are all headed there, but just from a purely macroeconomic perspective, when you have young populations, it's considered to be a bonus because you can actually grow your economies much more rapidly. So the trick is then to grow them quickly before they flee, like in this image, where refugees are fleeing from Africa and heading to Europe. This is very sad, and this is a true picture of what happens almost daily in Africa. And all those young people, many of these problems have been exacerbated by climate change, because agriculture, which is the mainstay of most Africans, is not sustainable anymore. In fact, 60% of all available arable land in the world is in Africa. So maybe we can start investing in agriculture to reverse some of this brain drain. In the next slide, you'll see that Africa is not alone. You can see from Latin and Southern America, they're heading into the US. You remember famously or infamously, Trump building a wall that was stopping people from crossing into Texas and California. That unfortunately doesn't solve the problem. You can see in Africa, from East Africa, West Africa, North Africa, people leaving to head into Europe. You can see from Indonesia and Malaysia, people trying to leave into northern parts of the country, and others heading towards Australia. But Australia has been effective in stopping people from reaching their shores. But this challenge is a global challenge. So we need to think about this as designers, particularly in nations like ours who have young people who we are losing through these migrations. The second major megatrend is shifts in economic power. And in the next slide, many of you are aware that BRICS, which is Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, was for a long time the dominant block of emerging economies. Well, part of what this did, it really brought these countries close. But now these countries are being overtaken by other different economic blocks. For example, one known as MINT, which is in the next slide. And MINT is Mexico, Indonesia, Nigeria, and Turkey. And while we're still settling with the acronyms, even though MINT sounds very nice because I don't mind mint tea for starters, there's new blocks that are emerging. And the next slide kind of shows us how complex this idea of emergence is. So we've got new countries coming up constantly. There's some they're calling the Fragile Five, and you can see that it's the former BRICS countries, while new groups like the Eagles are coming up, and the Civets are also coming up, and so on. But you can see China seems to be in almost each of these groupings. That's a conversation for another day. So the third of these megatrends is accelerating urbanization. And the images you'll see next will remind us of the challenges we have in these urban centers where we have glaring inequalities. For example, you can see the skyscrapers of the affluent in the background, while a lot of shanties and slums also, mushroom, rather unplanned, but as almost a necessity as dormitory centers to provide labor for these bustling cities. The next image, which is from Rio de Janeiro, I think has been shown many times because it's very dramatic. The kind of space and the amenities that are given to the people on the right, with tennis courts and swimming pools and beautiful balconies, and then the view that you have is basically what's beyond that wall, which are the slum areas, the favelas as they're known in Brazil. But I've seen similar settings in Africa and also in Asia. Fourth of these challenges is climate change and resource scarcity. I'll give you a case study of Cape Town, where I spent 18 years of my life before heading back to Kenya. This was Cape Town on around 2014 when we claimed to have had snow. It was more like frost, but I can assure you it was so confusing to us because it's the first time it happened in living memory. Just outside of Cape Town, Even the livestock was in shock because there was no grass to nibble on. And then the next slide shows you the very next summer, because that was winter, we had fires which were raging for 4 days uncontrollably, and that's Cape Town for you. Showing you the extremes in terms of the weather. That one season we have this extreme cold, and the very next summer we have this extreme heat, which led to these fires that was all over the place. And then a couple of summers later, the next slide, Cape Town ran out of water. It was the first major city in the world to declare that it had no water. All this sand you can see actually was part of the dam, and that previously was covered by water. And many other cities are struggling, but Cape Town was unique in that it was the first city in the world, major city, that actually declared it had no water. We now know that many other cities are struggling with the same challenge. And then finally, the final of this megatrends is technological breakthroughs. We are seeing what is happening now as we move into the fourth industrial revolution, Ravi. And we can see how artificial intelligence is coming into the fore. We can see machine learning, and the next image kind of shows us what will happen when we start mixing humans and machines and the ethical challenges that come up. In fact, right now there's a number of professions that are going to be obsolete by the middle of this century because technology is basically taking over, and a lot of it has to do with manufacturing and others. So we need to future-proof our own professions that we don't become, redundant and irrelevant to the future. And I believe one way to do that is to start to make contributions, for example, through the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, and to show that designers actually can still be part of the solution. So I'll give you a case study of how design has done this from the World Design Organization that I'm associated with, as well as a project that I championed in Cape Town on solid waste management. So those are the 17 goals, which have 169 targets. And for the purpose of this project, we selected those 8 goals. Of course, you can see the ones about well-being. In fact, COVID-19 has shown us that mental health has become the biggest challenge going forward. A lot of people have not recovered mentally and emotionally yet. Then sanitation and clean water. We need to think about affordable and renewable energy, infrastructure, innovation, responsible consumption and production, climate action, and of course, the collaboration, international collaboration for, realizing the goals. So that's Cape Town. That's a beautiful Table Mountain. For those of you that haven't visited Cape Town yet, it's at the southernmost tip of the African continent. The next slide will kind of give you an idea of the position. So if that's Africa and you see where India is, Cape Town is right at the bottom of Africa. A beautiful place where 2 oceans meet, the Indian Ocean and the Atlantic Ocean. So that's the place that this project was done, a place called Doenbach, which is an Afrikaans word. And if we move to the next slide, you'll see how we use the Sustainable Development Goals. We're going through those very quickly. Yes. And then the next slide will show some human faces. So we did a context analysis. We used the design thinking process and appreciative inquiry to understand the challenge that the communities were going through. And there's a small slide that will pop up that shows you the map right there. And if we move to the next slide, you kind of see how we consulted with the local community members, using the tools that designers know very well, sketching, drawing, lo-fi prototyping. But we made sure that right from the beginning, we worked with the community. And they raised very interesting examples, like how children and pets, got to eat garbage or touch garbage. So it informed the response that we had to come up with. So we went through this project. It took about 4 years because the city of Cape Town is a bureaucracy that also needed time to go through tendering processes. But now, earlier this year, we actually did install all these bins, and they named those bins after me. And just to keep me humble, I was reminded by my wife that a bin is not something that I should be too proud about, because people kick them and they put trash in them, lest hubris overtakes me. So that's how they're installing the bins there. If you can move to the next slide. So they're very simple. You put a post and then they've drilled holes so that people cannot vandalize them or misuse them. That's a ward councillor on the left and one of the mayoral committee members on the right actually commissioning those bins. And each household got its own bin. If we move to the next slide. And the color was inspired by the black box, believe it or not. Designers still have creative license because we know that the black box is only known as a black box because of what it does, not how it looks. It's actually a bright orange, so that it can be found. And that's an image of how we've installed those bins in one of the slum areas and how it has brought back human dignity and a sense of pride of place to the community. And the beautiful thing is the process was owned from the beginning by the community members, and they helped us to co-design these particular bins. There's another part of the system, which is the containerized collection points, the trolleys which carry the garbage, the uniforms people wear when they're collecting garbage, but I've only focused on the bin in the interest of time. And then just to remind us of the need for empathy as we design in socially conscious contexts. And this is the first president of Senegal, Léopold Sédar Senghor, put it very beautifully. He said, "I feel the other, I dance the other, therefore I am." And as I wrap up my presentation, friends, I just wanted to remind us that the most important quality or attribute of a designer is empathy. One of those that comes by association when you interact with community members is humility. And ultimately, the greatest tool in your arsenal is creativity. So as we wrap up now, I would want to wish you well and look forward to meeting you all in person very soon. You can wrap up now, Ravi, as we head to the end of this presentation. I hope that statement is correct. If not, you can sort me out later. Okay. And just to remind us that we're still going through this COVID pandemic. So stay healthy. And thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak to you. Yeah, thanks, Satish. I thank you, friends.
Wonderful.
Okay, so
I mean, we.
Yeah, yeah, I feel Aliyah there. Okay, very good. Good to see you all, friends. Yes.
That's I don't know. I think it was such a wonderful presentation. I mean, Mugendi's way, very disciplined, very clean, very articulate, and very inspiring. Let me open the floor for questions. Maybe people can. Anybody wants to go up first? Please go ahead. Advanced, sir, yeah, please go ahead. Sir, you need to unmute.
Yeah. How Mugendi, how are you? Good to see you.
Fine, Prof. Yes, indeed. I think I gave you a shout out at the beginning of my presentation.
Yes.
Nice to see you.
Yeah, it was nice. First thing, a little personal. After you showed the slides of those two women there, you remember you had given me slides of marriages in your town, no? Brides and for mathematics lectures. I still have them.
Yeah. Very good. Very
I
colorful event.
Use them also.
Excellent.
Okay. Coming back to today's presentation, it was a wonderful presentation, very inspiring, and I liked it. You're doing great work, frankly. There's one small observation that I want to make is the craft products had that identity which the modern products don't seem to have. It's the kind of problem that we face in India, you are also facing.
Indeed.
Yeah. In fact, we have failed to redefine modernity as Indian modernity or African modernity or things like that. We're still following a European modernity. And it's a...
I agree, Prof. And it's a challenge because the world is not interested in Me Too, kind of solutions. They want unique products. So we need, as designers, to take some responsibility and champion those identities, and craft is an excellent inspiration for that.
So craft traditionally had its identity. It was not deliberate. It came from the way it sort of grew. But now we are in the phase of conscious design, and we have to create that identity consciously.
Indeed.
And none of us, I mean, we are so much under European influence that we fail to do that.
It is indeed a challenge. So maybe I hope those of us that are present here will, when our guru speaks, we have to listen.
No, you are the guru now.
No, Prof, you'll always be my guru. I will, the Somalis have a saying, and I can quote it: be a mountain or lean on one. So you're one of the mountains we lean on.
Good, but it was wonderful to listen to you, because I had of course listened to you one more time in Brazil, but before that we listened to you as a student, and there's a sea of change. You're so confident, so gentle, and so good in presentation. Wonderful. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Prof. Great to see you.
Anybody else has a question? I'm just looking if there is anything in the chat box. I don't see. Please go ahead. Anybody wants to? Please, Yogesh, go ahead.
Yeah. Hi, Mugendi.
Hi,
Nice
Yogesh. How are you?
I'm good. Okay. I think a beautiful presentation. I think it reminded me of a lot of craft presentation that happens in India, where it just stays at the craft level and never, as Atwankar sir said, never transcends into modernity. So beautiful work. But one question that I had is, a lot of lineage that we have in our design, particularly in India, which came from the education system in design that came from Western. So probably the Ulm and Bauhaus had an influence on our education system, particularly in design. So what is happening in Africa right now? How is that lineage on design education happening? Is it getting homegrown, or is it happening from influences from Europe, US, or you also see some influence happening from India?
Thanks for that, Yogesh. I think that your observations are spot on. Part of why I was very keen on introducing Africa with the K is because this has actually become a continental movement. It has become a kind of a renaissance of sorts to rally African designers to start to take pride in their own narratives and in their own cultures, so that as they infuse design into this thinking, then it's something that we are proud of. So right now, as we speak, there's organizations. There's something we call the Africa Design Institute, where we have like-minded designers, mainly educators, and we've been challenging ourselves to design first as Mugendi, by example, to design using African inspiration, but also to teach the subjects beyond the Ulm and the Bauhaus models, because that's a starting point. That's where global design begins. But beyond that, you need to also go into social studies that kind of bring these layers, like those baskets I was showing, those different patterns. You can't know that unless you engage with the communities. So it's a challenge, because not everyone agrees with that. Some people would rather do European-looking designs, but there's a groundswell, and it's a revolution of people now like myself who say it's time for Africa to stand and show some creative confidence and not wait for validation from the West, because that has been traditionally the way we've done things.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Mugendi. Because that movement has to be grown to more, because we have our own challenges, and
Indeed,
and those challenges are absolutely unlike what Europe has or US has. So they need our own solutions.
Indeed, I agree.
Okay, great. Thanks. It was a pleasure watching your presentation.
Thank you. Thank you.
Just one observation that African graphic design has maintained its own unique identity, in spite of it being modern. They have success.
Indeed.
They are successful. Industrial designers are not.
Yes, yes. In fact, Prof, you're right. African graphic design and also fashion design.
Yeah.
Those two somehow kept their identity. So industrial designers are the ones struggling because you want to make a car that looks like a vehicle, but at the same time you're referencing your history of transportation. So it becomes a bit trickier when you get into some of the products.
Yes, Ajay, you have a question, is it? Ajay?
Yeah. So I was just curious to just to add to what Atmanka sir was actually saying. Mugendi, when you compared India and Africa, it's more or less same in terms of multiple languages and multiple, I don't know, geographic, constraints and all that kind of stuff. And we are basically from Kerala. I'm from Kerala, and Sadish is also from Kerala. We do have a very clear political stand in terms of certain things and the way things work in. So, do you think politics also plays a major role in having this kind of design per se? I'm trying to trying to articulate in the best possible way I can, but I'm just what you are getting what I'm saying. So, does politics involve in get involved in all these kind of things, or is it just design?
Ajay, I agree with you. First of all, the parallels between Africa and India are correct. And if I take a country like South Africa, India leads in the world in terms of the number of languages, at 23 official languages. South Africa follows at a distant second with 12 languages, and then the rest are very far behind. So in terms of social cultural complexity and richness and diversity, India and Africa are very similar in that sense. The place for leadership, I think, is very important, and I'm happy that Prof. Advanka is here, because the case of Curitiba in Brazil, which Prof and I actually visited, where an architect became the mayor of that city, and we saw what happened. Curitiba became a global benchmark for everyone. So maybe it's time for designers to become political leaders, and we can see that difference is going to be made because we have a lot of designers who are advisors to mayors and advisors to ministers. But I think it's time designers also became leaders in their own right, because you'll see the difference immediately when people start using design thinking and other creative strategies to deal with problems, because designers typically are problem solvers. They don't call committees just to send public resources. They actually call teams to do brainstorming and think through solutions. So that's a challenge to us, Ajay. And I think you can see this example of leadership in a country like Rwanda. Rwanda is one of the smallest countries in Africa. But right now, if you look for innovation and then put plus Africa in a Google search, you'll find Rwanda is always topping the first 3 entries. Rwanda has just launched the first dedicated Center for the Study of Artificial Intelligence, the only one in Africa to do that. So political leadership is very important. Rwanda, if you remember, in 1994 almost disappeared from the face of the earth because of a genocide, where almost 1 million people died. But they've learned from that, and now they've become leaders. And someone said that what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. So maybe those who survived now realize that they need to be creative and not destructive.
I think, Venkat, you have a question? Go ahead.
Yes, so thank you, Mugendi, for a wonderful presentation. So one of the megatrends that I see and probably did not feature in this report was the rise of China, and especially in the context of Africa. Now, China has come in a big way in many places, many of those countries. primarily to exploit resources there, but then also they are building infrastructure. Increasing populations of Chinese have located themselves there. They are also, I believe, influencing culture. They are very industrious people. Okay, I'm sure there must be something that must be rubbing off as well, as because of their work ethics and the way they do things, efficiency, stuff like that. So wouldn't you think that the rise of China, especially in Africa, would be something that would be like a very influencing trend that you can see in the next couple of decades?
Yes, that is correct. In fact, most of the mega projects around infrastructure, the Chinese are winning every tender because no one else can compete with them in terms of speed, scale, and sophistication. So a lot of our local contractors try, but they cannot handle the scale or the sophistication of some of the projects. The Chinese factor is real. And Kenya happens to be the only African country in the Belt and Road Initiative. So we've seen a lot of investment from China in this country. My only fear is that China is a very strong and domineering influence because some of the locally grown and homegrown entrepreneurs are suffering. So for example, in Kenya, one of the biggest challenges has been around the fashion design industry, because when you import very cheap Chinese products and flood the market with them, you have to have some level of protection as much as you want to be an open and free economy. Some of our sectors are very vulnerable, and yet they create a very rich value add in terms of the kind of employment opportunities they give. So it's both a blessing because Africa needs infrastructure, but also it's a challenge because it's so dominant that some of our talents now are becoming redundant, and some of our locally grown entrepreneurs and infrastructure development teams are now not able to compete at the same scale. But it's a big factor. It's a big factor. China's influence is being felt right across the continent. In fact, they built the Africa Union headquarters in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, for free. But the Dutch taught us that there's no such thing as a free meal. So we know we are going to pay along the line sometime in cash or kind.
Okay, so we are 10:08, and I don't know if there are any more questions because this has been a very special lecture. So I hope those who are staying back are not cribbing. Is there any one last question maybe?
No.
Sir, go ahead.
Can I just put a small, taking what Ajay has mentioned, next time Mugendi would address us as Mugendi President Kenya. So
no, I thought Ajay is going to be. I thought Ajay is going to be in the state government of Kerala before I get there.
Okay, both of you will present. It was very nice. Nice meeting you also.
Thank you, Prof. Much appreciated.
Great. I think we really have to close this session. Mugendi, thank you so much. I know there is nothing much for me to summarize, and I think it has been such an inspiring session. Just that one thing that stays in my mind is the fact that, as you said, that after coming to India, when you did your master's program, that you actually discover Africa. I think the same is good personally for me after seeing the presentation, that probably I will do the same. I will probably go and start discovering India a lot more vigorously. Excellent presentation. And I'm sure that a lot of people here who may want to have a discussion share your coordinates in the forum, and I'm sure we'll be equally excited to continue this conversation.
Excellent. I'd be happy to but I look forward to coming to India in person. I miss India. Like I said, those were the most important 2 years of my life. They fundamentally impacted me spiritually and philosophically, as well as creatively. And anything I've done since has been markedly influenced by that period.
Wonderful, wonderful. And also, I thank all the attendees today. And we also had to stay back a little more than our usual time. I think it was worth it. On behalf of all of us from the alumni group, Mugendi, it's a big thank you to you. And we would also like to see you again, probably on a very focused topic or a focused discussion on some aspect of what you have shared, and probably some projects that you'll execute from now on. And we also wish you all the best for all the roles that you execute, and hope to see you soon. And to all the members who have parts lined up, and I will post the information.
Thank you, friends, and hope to see you all soon.
Yeah.
Definitely. Definitely.
Right.
Thank you.
So waiting for the next occasion to play.
Yes.
So the recording of this will be posted by tomorrow.
And feel free to share the presentation also, anyone who wants a copy.
Sure, I will do that. I will do that. Thanks
Okay,
to
thank
all of you, and good night, and have a good rest of the week, and see you again next week. Thank you.
Thank you. Good night, everyone. Keep well. See you next time. Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you. Bye.